for Grabs, a podcast where three unfiltered friends talk about anything and everything. And now, here are your hosts, Tracy, Kim, and Rachel.
Welcome to Up for Grabs. I'm Rachel. I'm here with my friends Kim.
Hello.
And Tracy.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
You always look scared when I say hi to you.
I'm a little bit scared. No, I'm not.
I swear she wants to do this podcast.
Proper. She's like being really proper.
Really? I mean,
that's what she's trying to do.
That's something I don't think I've ever seen. Really proper Tracy. Welcome back to Up for Grabs. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about grief. And I know to some of you that might just be a Debbie Downer subject.
Make the Debbie Downer sound.
Maybe I'll ask Rob if he can play the wah, wah, like the sad trombone after I say that. But we want to talk about grief because it is obviously a universal thing that everyone goes through. But no one ever talks about it because it's sad. So today we wanted to just talk a little bit about different kinds of griefs, how we cope with grief, things that we've learned, maybe even some positives that you can take out of it. Yeah. I think you can. But originally we got to talking about this when Kim Schaefer's boyfriend, Anderson Cooper, started a podcast solely about
Grief.
Yeah. And it started because he was going through his mom's things. Is that what it was?
So 2 years ago, he's had 2 seasons of his podcast. It's called All There Is. I highly, highly recommend it. You don't have to be a huge Anderson Cooper supporter, but he definitely has a gift with being able to interview people and speak to people. And it started, he's had a pretty tragic life. As most of you know, probably his mom is Gloria Vanderbilt. So he led a very privileged life, but he lost his dad at 10 years old, of a heart attack. And it really wasn't spoken about. And he had a brother at 22 years old that jumped off their apartment building in New York in front of his mom and committed suicide.
Is that how he did it? Because I listened to that thing and he didn't say how. Not that it matters, but oh my gosh.
So, and his mom died a couple years ago, but she lived a very long life. She was in her late 90s. And he's attempting to go through her apartment and go through her things. And she left him things. And she left him notes and she left him boxes and she left him different memories of, how she and it's been a surprise to him. And this podcast was for him to heal. And, it's so touching. So he interviews people just on various forms of grief, different types of trauma, what people have been through. And he talks a lot about himself too.
Yeah.
And he's vulnerable and I don't know. It just, I found it very therapeutic.
Well, I didn't know much about Anderson Cooper. I mean, I did know who his mom was, but I didn't know about his brother. And so when you told me to listen to the podcast, I was really taken aback, not aback, but just how vulnerable he was on the podcast.
Yes, I was too.
Yeah. And and for it to have been like I want to say his brother was in his early 20s. So he said he was older than he. So like Anderson Cooper may have been in his teens. 16 or 17.
They were close in age.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that they were,
But just, he's obviously a grown man now, so he's in his, late 50s?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that he was talking about were so raw, like so on the surface, even though this happened to him X number of years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. You would have thought he really didn't address it until now.
No, he protected his mom.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He did not. He suppressed it.
Well, let's talk about that then. Because when I think of suppressing things, I think of Tracy. I don't know why I said that. That's true. It is.
Okay. That was funny.
Speaking of suppressing things. No, I just, one thing that I think that is interesting to talk about is that all three of us could have the same thing happen to us. I mean, we haven't, but we all three have been through different challenges and traumas that required us to grieve. But even if we all had the same experience at the same time, we would all be in different stages of dealing with it.
Yes.
Anderson Cooper was in like the first stage 25 years later because he never allowed himself
To grieve.
to think about it, to grieve. So I want Tracy to speak on that.
Oh, okay then. Well, I will say, because they call it like the 7 stages of grief, and I wrote them down because I didn't remember them
I thought
all.
it was only 5. Did
Gosh,
they add
I
2?
had no idea
So
it was 7.
There are 2 different, like some people just say it's sadness, anger, guilt, and acceptance. That's just like a 4 basic.
Yeah.
But then the 7 stages are considered shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance / hope, and then processing, which
What's
I don't
processing?
know. That seems like a lot of work. I'm not
Processing
here
seems-
for all of that. That seems like a lot.
Processing seems like it should be intertwined in all 7 of them.
Yes. And you joke about me holding things in or whatever, but like, 'cause, and I don't know why I laugh about things that aren't funny, but I do. So like I was kind of like diagnosed kind of once with like what they called compound grief or cumulative grief. I've heard different terminology, but
does that mean?
It meant like, so, my mom died. And then 2 weeks later, my son had a stroke. And then a week later, another one. But I'll just say for the sake of it, it was a couple weeks between my mom dying and my healthy son, who's 10, having a stroke.
Right.
And he didn't die. So, yay, he's still here and
Right.
amazing. But there was still grieving that happened for the life that I thought he would have.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I think we all deal with that. And a lot of people don't think of it as grieving.
Right.
They might think something of regret. They might use a different word. They might say, I regret that I didn't do this or didn't do that. But what it really is that they're grieving the loss of what could have been.
Expectations but it's important for me to say though that doesn't mean that his what isn't magnificent in and of itself. It just isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I think a lot of people have that, for a lot of different reasons in a lot of different situations. And the most important part of that was that I never processed the death of my mom, and I didn't have time to because he needed me full time for that. And so then you just get busy doing other things, and then you're kind of at a place where you never dealt with something.
And I think Anderson Cooper could probably agree
Absolutely.
with that. Or he might have busied himself on purpose. Like he did say, like, I threw myself into my career.
right.
I would pack a
traveled
bag
the
and go
world.
to Beirut instead of dealing with the fact that,
Yeah.
He was drawn to being in war
yeah.
because he saw other suffering and it could hide his suffering in much the same way as when when Zach had the stroke, it masked the grief of losing your mom.
Right.
It was almost like a protective mechanism
Yeah.
but once that passes and things get better with Zach, you still have to come back to what you didn't process.
Yeah, I don't need you to judge me, Kim. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not.
I'm
No,
joking.
I'm
joking.
saying
You
that.
know that.
And I'm saying that
I'm
if it's
joking.
unprocessed,
It's going
then
to, yeah.
it lingers and it,
Yeah,
and it
for sure.
affects how you know.
For sure.
But I think it's tricky because how do you know? I mean, this is okay. I don't know if this is really a good question or not, but how do you know you've really processed it? Because like I can sit here and say I feel like I've been through the 7 stages of grief.
Right.
I feel like I have. So, but isn't there a way that maybe I'm acting? I can't think of an example, but that I didn't really process it. Like I just told myself, "Oh yeah, you're
Right.
you're good with this," but
And can it come back up? Like it's not like
Grief never
it's not
ch-
like all of a sudden you're okay, I've dealt with that,
Yeah.
and then you don't get sad again because you do, like anniversaries or like of the death or the whatever it is, you can get sad all over again where you thought you were fine with it, and then somebody asks you a question, or you smell something, or
Yes.
whatever takes you back to that time, and then you're right back there. So
and I think that's not fair because I think if I've gone through my 7 stages of grief, once I checked one off, it should be closed to
that
me.
card has been punched, and it is time to move
I don't know
on.
why I
Wouldn't
have
that
to
be
go
so
back.
nice if it was? Don't you see the quote a lot that grief never ends; it just changes. And I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
it's because of the pages I follow and the different self-help things.
Your algorithm.
My algorithm definitely shows me that like grief is anything that brings us hurt, sadness, longing,
loss.
And I don't think that you can ever make grief go away. I don't think that our human brain works that way, but I think that you learn to process it differently, and that you, I don't know, like you said, it's kind of ebb and flow.
Well, what do you think? Because I think everyone does cope with it obviously differently and at a different pace. Do you guys have any ways that you feel like were successful ways of helping you cope with grief?
I will say that I have told my kids, which this is not really, this wasn't planned for this, but I lost one of my aunts today and one of my dad's sisters.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's going to make me cry just because there were 8 of them and now there's 1.
Oh.
And that just makes me sad for them, but she lived a long life, and my Aunt Margaret. But I tell my kids all the time that when you love a lot of people, you lose a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it has to be worth it. That's the trade-off, is that you get a lot of love along the way. So for us, we are able to deal with grief, I think, better than some people, as I cry, but better than some people because we just focus on what we got from the relationship.
Right.
And accept or be gracious about that we had that love, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people aren't feeling the loss of people because they don't have them. And that hurts my heart. Whether
Right.
you don't have a big family or you just don't have people that love you.
Right.
Either way, it's sad to me that you wouldn't feel those losses because you don't have those people.
When you just said that, I thought, wow, in my early 20s, I didn't date a lot of people. I was really kind of closed off that way. Like, I just didn't want to let a lot of people get to really know me. Like, I just didn't think it was any of their business unless they were going to be in my life for a long time. And now it totally makes sense. I was protecting myself from having to let go of someone again. Like, I didn't think anyone was worth loving because I didn't think I could deal with not having them around anymore.
Because
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you went through.
Because my brother died when I was 19 and he was 21. And so I was always like, I don't want to go find someone and introduce myself to them and like them and have feelings for them and then have it go away again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And that took me a good, 5 or 6 years to even go out into the dating world after that.
Yeah.
And I'm still not very trusting. And maybe that's still why. Maybe I was just like, I don't want to have to go.
I think when something happens like that, it changes the way that you view your life. I mean, I'm not, this is my first impression of you. When I first got to know you, I felt that you were very guarded. And I kind of knew your story because my husband's parents and your parents were friends. And then when I got to know more of your story, I was like, well, no wonder she's guarded, because that happened to her at such a pivotal point in her life.
Yep.
That, and I'm glad you let me in and that I got to be your friend in I hope forever, like a lifelong friend. But I think that, until you get to know somebody's history and it's somebody's story,
Yeah, so maybe if you're listening and you have some people in your life that you think are being standoffish, perhaps they're grieving and aren't ready to let you in.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that you cope, Tracy?
Did I say I cope? No, I did not.
She has zero coping mechanisms, you guys.
No, I do. I focus on what they've brought to my relationship.
Your positivity.
Yeah, I try to look at the good of what's there and be grateful. Like I said, grateful for what I've already had. Now, do I think that I don't know if what I'm doing is working, but it gets me through the day. So that's working enough. I don't know if I've processed it, but.
Well, I have a question, and I'm not being therapist,
No,
but
go ahead.
and we don't need to get into anything super deep, but do you find yourself when an uncomfortable feeling arises or when a sad feeling arises, pushing it away?
Of course.
Like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
I
make jokes, that's one of my things. not to brag. Yeah, that is something I do because it's easier.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't want to look vulnerable.
That's what I was going to say. You don't want to show your vulnerability, which I think vulnerability, I love vulnerability. I think that I see some of your vulnerable side.
Well, it makes me laugh because I feel like everyone does, and they'd be shocked to know that I think they don't.
Yeah, I probably don't see. I feel like
hiding it.
I feel like through learning, getting to even know you better through the years that we've done this podcast. Yes, I think there's probably a lot of vulnerability we don't see, but know that that is not an unattractive quality in someone at all.
Right.
And it's not a quality that would push somebody away.
I just don't want to look weak.
I know you don't.
Well, why is it weak?
I don't know. I didn't say it was right. I don't know, but that's the feeling I have, or like I couldn't do it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think that needs to be said because I think there's plenty of people that feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think it validates someone's feelings that, oh, I do the same thing. I think I'm weak. When you're not weak,
Yeah.
you're just protecting yourself.
Yeah. Kim, what have you found that you do to cope?
Oh, I just let it all out. No, I don't know. I think that I have a hard time. I stay in the anger phase for a very long time. And I think that I look in the mirror and think I'm weak, because I show my weakness. Because I show the vulnerability and I show the crying and I show the out of control feeling of grief. I struggle with that a lot. I mean, we all know, if you've listened to this podcast, that I have an overwhelming fear of death, and I've had some I lost a child. So, a stillborn, I don't want to say that it was a child that was like of age, a stillborn, and
She's still a child.
She's still a child, and I can't go into a lot of detail because it would take too long, but it changed my whole outlook on grief. And that was the first time that I experienced something in my life that was horribly sad that I found beauty in.
Yeah.
So, and I've been processing that for 10 years and trying to wrap my head around it and trying to understand. And I'm definitely more of a feeler, and I let my feelings show and I let my guard down.
Well, I think
but that makes me feel weak. Like Tracy may say, I feel weak because I don't show that side, or I don't want somebody to see that side of me. And say, but I feel like, well, people look at Kim as like, oh, God love her, she just can't cope with anything. When all I'm really doing is just showing how I feel.
I was going to say, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and that's just what I interpret people think. And nobody's ever said that to me,
well, I hope not. I don't think anyone's running around saying that about you, but you did bring up one point that I think universally, I think we could all agree that when something happens and we're grieving, the one thing, and I put this down on a thing that is something I've learned from grief, and I think it's good, but at the same time it's not good, is that I am not in control of anything. Of anything. Yeah. And as a mom and as a younger person, you feel like you're in control of most things that happen during your day. And then something really happens and you realize, oh my gosh, who am I to be running around here acting like I am in control of anything? And it's just kind of, it's good and it's bad, because it's kind of like, it takes some pressure off. You're like, it's not my doing. It's nothing that I did that caused me to be in this position of grief. But in the same time, it's so frightening that
I know
you have control of nothing.
Relinquishing control.
It's rough.
And being okay with the unknown.
Yeah, I'm not okay.
And I feel like I've been through from a very big family, so I feel like I've been through so many deaths that I'm like an old pro at it, kind of.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I started thinking like of myself, and I don't worry about aging in the sense of like I look old. I mean, my hair's gray, whatever.
It looks cute today, by the way.
Thanks. But I don't worry about aging that way. But recently, like in the last 6 months, I've started thinking about, what if it hurts? Like when I'm sick, if I'm sick and dying, like,
that's
what
one
if
of
it
my
hurts?
biggest fears.
And it's, like, and I can't handle it. I'm like, well, you've been through pain, you can handle it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like that fear has started creeping in that I never had before. And I don't know what to do with that fear, because like, I'm not afraid of dying in the sense that like, I have loved completely. It's not like I feel like when my mom died, she said, that she had done everything and loved everybody as much as she could and wanted to, and she was ready to go.
Yeah.
And there was something very comforting in having her say that and not be scared to
I was
go.
going to say, how confident was she? That's
she was
great.
very confident.
That makes me feel good.
And I mean, like, she said, it's okay. I'm okay. And I want you to be okay. And so we were like, well, all right, that's what we're doing, because she said it. So therefore
that's
it
what a
is.
very comforting thing to hear your parents say. I mean, that's what you want. That's what you want to hear them say.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm banking on, it's my personal theory, and I'm just tell me I'm right so I feel good about it, is that I go back to thinking of when I first found out I was pregnant with my first child, Sam. I had never been to the hospital. I had never broken a bone. I had never done anything, nothing. And I don't consider myself a person that can take a great deal of discomfort. And within a minute of finding out I was pregnant, the first thing I thought was, I cannot give birth to a baby. Well,
like
now I've really
married
painted
to my
myself
daughter.
into a corner, haven't I? Something's going to give on this one. But no, I did. I thought, I'm petrified. I don't know. It just seems awful and it's scary and no one can help you.
You'll be the first to have ever done it.
And congratulations to me. I was the first to give birth. No, and then this is what happened. All of a sudden, it got to be like the 8th month, and I was so swollen and had so much acid reflux and couldn't get a good night's sleep because turning over in the bed was like impossible. That I remember the day it kind of broke me, and I was like, I don't care how this has to happen. I knew how it was going to happen, by the way.
Right.
But I didn't care how. All of a sudden, I was just like, this just needs to be over.
You relinquish control.
And I'm wondering, my thought is that's exactly the way I will feel on my deathbed. I'll be scared, but something washes over you that you're like, you know what? It can't get any worse than what I'm doing right now. I'm going to just bank on that it's going to be better and just kind of let it go.
Nice.
So can you guys tell me that that's exactly what's going to happen to me?
I think that's what's going to happen.
Thanks, Tracy.
No, I think about that a lot, like different, like a spirituality thought of that,
Yeah.
of being like a higher power taking control and taking over, or like you said, I look at people who suffer and who are sick and who, you see that go through chemo and you go through, and then when you have your toughest day with the flu, you're like, I understand where people are. I'm done. I don't want to feel like this anymore. And they just, and they're near the end and they just let go. And I hope it's like that.
Well,
I don't think we'll get out of this world without pain.
No, but I'm hoping
I do too.
that it's just I just wish for it, like your mom seemed just at peace with it, and I think that's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah, me too.
And we're going for it. I do think there is a lot to be said, that I think there's a lot to learn about yourself and others in grief. One thing that I think might be helpful to anyone listening, one piece of advice, a lot of people say, I don't know what to say. If your friend or someone that you work with or whatever has some sort of tragedy, everyone always says, I don't know what to say. And you don't, but I think people need to realize that they don't need to know what to say.
No.
But they need to acknowledge. They can't, if they can't bring themselves to say the words, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, you need to let the person know who's grieving,
I'm here for you.
I'm here for you. It's all you have to say.
Because you don't know in what way it might be. Just, I'm here for you.
And some people, kind of panic a little bit because it is weird, and no one likes, you don't want to make the person that's already grieving sad by bringing it up again. It's just kind of, you walk on eggshells. It's like everyone knows it happened, but my advice to anyone out there, if something befalls someone, acknowledge it. If you can't say the words, which sometimes it's hard to do face to face, send them a card.
Yep.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Believe me, you remember the people that send you the card and who acknowledge that you're going through something.
Yeah.
So that is my one takeaway for anyone that thinks, gosh, I really hate bringing stuff like that up to people, especially to people that maybe you're not super close with.
Right.
But it is important if you see someone on a regular basis that if something happens to them, you can't not say something.
Well, and that is something that I had kind of written down, is that public grief is something that I think our generation has, that in the past, not that they didn't have public grief, they went to funeral homes, whatever, in the sense that due to social media, the news, our access to information in general, we are grieving school shootings. You know, those weren't a thing, but now they are. We are grieving just like someone...
Missing people.
And then you put yourself in that position and you say, wait, my child, you know, that boy that's missing in Nashville, he's
It's breaking
21
my
years
heart.
old and he's been gone for 10 days and his parents miss him dearly. I've got kids that go out that have been to Nashville and I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
you know, thank you God that it wasn't them that went missing. And then you think those poor parents, and there's a grieving that you feel
Oh, absolutely.
communally for
Because you
other
see it.
people
It's
because
in
you
your face.
see it so much every day. If you are it, and you don't even have to be turning on the news. I mean, it's just all around you. You know, there's
a
just
heaviness,
there. And
yeah,
I
there.
don't know how that plays into how we deal with it in general, or just that we're so inundated with it that I don't know. Maybe there needs to be a better grieving system.
I think it's helped. A grieving
create
system.
a whole
Yes.
grieving system.
Well, let me tell you,
Tracy's new grieving system, you guys.
Hey, ma'am, there is a career that I am considering that I'd never heard of.
What is
I
it?
say considering, like I've just thought about it for 2 seconds. It is called a death doula or end of life doula, similar to a birth doula.
Wow.
Or like
In that-
similar to like a hospice caregiver, or
Oh, but you are not giving care to the patient. I mean, you are, like, you're helping them process their end of life.
Yeah.
As far as like, if you need something or if you want
Tie
to
up some
tell a
loose ends.
story, tie up loose ends. You're there more for them than the family, but also to kind of help the family along the way. But you're not like a nurse. You're not a
you're just a-
health caregiver. You're not in charge of
just a
medicines. You're not
support.
doing any of that. It is just to work with people through the end of life, which I just think is kind of a
Where did you
cool
see that this
concept.
was a thing?
I read it in a book.
Really?
Yes. And I'm like,
I think it's a
what?
very cool concept. I mean,
Just because people are so uncomfortable with it,
Yeah.
and I am not uncomfortable with death. And I, like I said, I know a lot of people are, but I've lost a lot of people. So I'm not uncomfortable in the sense of like, oh gosh, I don't know what to say. I'll just hug you. I'm cool with that, you know, and then if I
And-
find the right words, that's fine.
I think this particular, like being, what was it called?
A death doula.
Death doula. I think by not being emotionally, personally attached to the person,
Yeah.
you can help them more.
Maybe.
Because you don't know anything
No,
about.
I agree.
You know, you don't come in with any preconceived notions. You don't know the family dynamic. It's just you and that person. I think you would. I think that would be a really valuable asset, especially to people that have a big family or like kind of.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was a cool concept and I'm just learning about it. But I just thought, oh, maybe that's something at some point I would want to do. I don't know.
Well, I always thought, like Kim, you said, hospice workers. I think.
our angels.
Can you
Yes.
believe that someone does that?
And it's a different, like the doula, this is how I kind of picture it. I've been in situations where I've been in like a room with hospice. You know, my grandma was in hospice. It's a lot going on. Hospice not only takes care of the patient, but they're trying to navigate the family through end stages. And this is what's going to happen. And this is what this, and this is what's that. And it's this, and this. But if there's a person dying that's still in a decent state of mind, I personally would love a death doula, because I think that I would need and want and crave somebody outside of my family and outside it, that to just be there for me one-on-one,
Right.
and to let me talk,
And you can be honest with
and
them.
let me
Yeah.
just say, this is what I'm scared of. It, you know, maybe when it's quiets down and when it's at night and nobody's around. That's kind of how I picture that, and I think that's a little different than a hospice nurse.
Yeah.
because they're there for a whole different reason. I mean, they're there, you know, for comfort, but they're also there for
morphine.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
morphine,
you know, whatever
and
it is.
vitals and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And I just think that's, you know,
Yeah, it's interesting. I
It
mean,
is.
I didn't even know it was a thing. So for anybody who
and
wants
it
to look
shows
it
how
up,
we
it's a
are
thing.
kind of evolving on how we handle. And I'm
Yeah.
just going to bring this up briefly, but when you were talking about like death, I mean, I had a stillborn daughter, and after I had her, I was in the hospital for a day and a half, and I had friends and family come in and hold her. And a certain generation is very uncomfortable with that and doesn't understand it and doesn't know why you're lingering and doesn't understand why you just can't just be cut and dry.
Right.
And then there's another generation of you hold this precious baby and you grief the life she did not have, but look at the beauty of what she is. And was.
Yeah.
And that's changed, and the hospital's changed, and they have a whole team of nurses that deal solely with that. They have a team of photographers that come in and take pictures of your baby, and they're there for that. They've just thought of it all.
I
you
wonder
know?
when they started doing that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't.
That seems so forward thinking that.
You know, I don't know if it's certain hospitals. I know my particular nurse was an angel. Like, she took Isabel for a couple hours and put on the dress that I bought for her and took pictures, knitted her a hat, made me a memory box, took pieces of her. I mean, everything when you're in a fog, numb.
Yes.
I didn't even realize I even had any of that stuff until I was at home.
Right.
And I'm like, she did all this. Like, they acknowledged her life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So-
And that's all you ever really want.
Yeah. So I think that we have, as you know, and I notice a lot more on social media that people will show pictures
Yeah.
of not, you know, like if they're, I mean, just going to say if they're dead baby.
Right.
I mean, and that people will acknowledge that. And before it just was not spoken
It was
of.
super uncomfortable because
And
we
it is.
didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes a long way. The other thing that I think is hard but really important is to be able to say Isabel's name, to
Yeah.
say
When you were talking about
Matt's
just acknowledging.
name, to say your mom's name, because I went a good 20 years without being able to say it without crying.
Yeah.
And then so I didn't want anyone to talk about it. You know, I say go and say something to somebody, but I wanted like to tell my husband about him, and I wanted to have my kids know about him. And it's one of those things that it's so hard to explain.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you explain someone's life if they never met them?
Right.
So I wanted them, but at the same time, it took me almost 20 years just to say his name without crying. So I think that it's really important that when you were saying that the nurse at the hospital, like doing personalized things, acknowledging Isabel specifically, or
Right.
like we've looked through pictures and stuff and we have movies, but
But I think you also have to tell the stories. You have to tell the very little nonsense stories, because that is the nuance of the person, the little
True.
bit. I'm in a group message with my sisters and my cousin Liz Ann, and you know, we knew that my aunt was going to die these past few days, and I told a story in there where I said it was in my best impersonation of her, and she would say, Tracy, like she would yell at your name like you were going to be in trouble, but you weren't. But she was like, Tracy, I was probably 20, I don't know. I always thought you were the nice one and the sweet one, but I just heard you were the mean one. And I said, well, who told you that? And she said, Liz Ann, who's my cousin, and not her daughter. It was like another aunt's daughter. And I'm like, well, Liz Ann's a liar. And she laughed and fell forward like she was one of those people that would fall into you laughing and like, you know, just like kind of hit you as she's laughing, and sounds like Augie Doggy, the cartoon dog that would laugh.
Oh, I love Augie
And
Doggy.
so anyway, but it's that kind of story that,
Yeah,
you know,
just
you just think
acknowledgement.
it's nothing big. It didn't matter. It was 5 seconds of a conversation, but it kind of spoke to the essence of her. The fact that she would just come to me and say that, ridiculous. Why don't you keep that to yourself? But she couldn't help it. But anyway.
well, I love that. I thought of both of you actually when I was looking at the top stressful life events. Did you look those up?
No.
No.
Top stressful life events: death,
Check.
divorce,
Yep.
moving,
Yep.
illness,
Yep.
and job loss.
Oh, hey.
Hey there, Tracy. Hey there, Tracy.
Where are my people at?
Oh, I've lost many jobs.
Yes. We those
By
small
choice.
jobs.
By choice.
Small jobs.
My small jobs. Yeah.
So maybe that's where I said that you must be suppressing something, because I feel as though you've checked at least one of these at some point in time within the past 5 years.
Maybe.
All right. Well, I'm glad everything's working out so well for you.
Thank you.
She gets out of bed every day.
She does.
Yep,
She puts
she
one
does.
foot in
That's
front of the other.
That's right.
What have you learned about either yourself or just in general through grief?
Just that you don't have options. I guess there are options to quit, but I don't see that as an option. So you just keep going until things get better. I mean, that's what I think it is.
Okay. Kim, did you have anything that you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, what Tracy said, I think that when you are hit with what you feel at the time is the worst thing that could happen to you, and you know that feeling, that gut punch, that I can't breathe, I don't believe this is happening, and then, oh boy, here's life, and you don't have a choice. I mean, you know, like when I lost Isabel, I had young kids. My husband's been recently diagnosed with cancer. I have adult children. You still have to live your life and take it
Still
day
go
by
to the grocery
day.
store. Yeah.
And you learn that, at least in my case, that it kind of evens itself out a little bit.
Yeah.
It becomes manageable or sustainable for the time being.
Yeah.
And that's all you can ask for.
Yeah. I think that when I was thinking about it, I felt like one thing that I learned, and I guess it's good. I mean, it is good that through experiencing something traumatic, I feel like I can help other people
Yeah.
when something happens to them.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I can really honestly relate to their needs and how they're feeling and the good way to respond. I don't know. It's not like you become an expert or anything, but you're just like,
But you kind of do.
yeah.
You know, like you're like, I will use as our friendship, both of you. I know more about you than most. And I know that you're an ear, like that. It's going to sound really corny, but like that, if I needed to fall into you with grief and despair, that I could, because you get it.
Yeah.
Because it may not be the exact thing, but when people share their grief with you,
Yes.
it makes you feel like that you have commonality
Yes.
and that they understand you.
And I think I would understand a lot more people if I knew what they were or have been grieving. I think a lot of the times, faults that I find in people, if I really knew them and
No,
knew,
they're just judgments.
It-
We
it-
all do it.
it might be because they're going through something that I
Yeah.
don't know about, and
Yeah.
so kind of everybody is.
Yeah.
That's why I do like that saying. You know, you always post it on Facebook.
No, it's a really good saying
What is it?
Which one?
about like
Be nice
to people, because you have no idea what battles they are facing.
Yeah.
That's hard to be that way,
It is.
because it's easier to judge someone
Yeah.
than to empathize.
Yeah.
To me, it is. I mean,
Yeah.
just because it's just a quick reaction.
And the other thing that I think I learned through grief, instead of saying why me, I think why not me?
know.
Because
I don't think that, but go on.
really. You never.
I know a lot of people say that.
You say why me?
Well, I don't know that I say why me, but I also don't say why not me. I'm like, okay, is this a joke? That's enough.
Am I being pranked?
Am I being punked? Where's Ashton Kutcher?
No, but I think before anything, traumatic happened, nothing happened to me. I felt like nothing could happen to me.
Right.
Why would it? I'm just
Absolutely.
this,
Like an untouchable?
yeah. Well, just that
Yeah.
it's just such an ordinary life I'm living.
I know.
Nothing extraordinarily bad or good is going to happen to me. Why would it? And then it did, and then I was like, why
Okay.
did I ever think that I was exempt
Okay, yeah, no,
from any
I
of
see
this?
that.
So I guess I don't want to say I'm welcoming. Welcoming.
That's what I thought
grief
at first
welcome
you were
here.
saying.
No,
I was like, well, come on now.
bring it on.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that I play the card of I'm grieving something or but somebody has it worse.
What we
And I go to therapy, and my therapist tells me all the time, there are big T's and there are little T's. There's big traumas, there's little traumas. And one big trauma is the same as 5 or 6 little traumas, and that never minimalize what your T is.
Right.
And don't compare yourself to others, because in the grand scheme of things, what you feel, what you need validated is just as important as anybody else.
So
Don't
comparing
compare
grief.
traumas.
Yeah.
I think everything in the world, everything is relative. So if a hangnail is the worst pain you've ever felt, that would be
okay.
really painful.
And that was the
You know,
worst pain I ever felt before I had a baby.
Yeah, and that would be really painful. You know what I mean? I just think it's all relative of what you know. When you said earlier, it made me think, because when I said like how things happened in succession with my mom dying, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing that's ever happened. And then 2 weeks later, when a 10-year-old has a stroke, that's way worse than your mom who's lived a full, happy life dying.
Absolutely.
So then I'm like, oh my gosh. And then he had a little bit of facial droop and one eye was a little bit off. And I was like, oh my gosh, my poor baby. Look at his face. That is so sad. And then a week later, he had a more catastrophic stroke and it affected one side of his body and his whole face, drooped on one side. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing this again.
Like,
I am not falling for this
I
trick,
know.
And I was like, no, I don't say,
Yep.
that this is the worst, because there's always worse.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I thought, oh, why me? When all,
Why not
nope,
you?
Nope. So I'm not thinking that, but I'm also, anyway.
Yeah.
Well-
and that's what you were saying, just
Yeah.
the uncontrol, not being in control.
Yeah.
And that's what I talk with a lot in therapy is when something bad happens to you and you think it's the worst thing that could happen to you, then you're constantly on guard. And everything seems catastrophic that might happen.
Right.
And I don't know how, I don't have this secret recipe, but relinquishing control, and being,
And I think
that's the hardest thing, is that you don't control the majority of what happens to you.
And I think relinquishing the control probably comes when you're doing all the little things, like saying the person's name,
Yeah.
telling stories about them,
Yes, all of that
journaling,
helps.
writing,
Meditation,
doing all of that. You can get to that
Yeah, you can.
until something happens, and then you're back in the stupid stages of grief.
Darn it, back to square one with shock.
Well, everyone, I'm so happy you guys joined us for this special. I'm going to call this the very special edition of Up for Grabs. Kind of like, when you were little and you had the after school specials.
I
And
could not have loved those days more. I ran home. Well,
if a
no, I was
sitcom had a
fat,
very
but I
serious
walked fast.
episode, yeah.
Yeah, it's like something we said today just resonated
Yeah.
with, I would think, because we all kind of share that similar,
Yeah, quit,
that.
quit pretending you're not grieving out there,
Yeah.
people. We know. Just we're on to you. And then we're here to support. Now, I hope that everyone, had a little nugget of something that we said that they can agree with or think about or pass on and use as they go on with your life. So thank you so much for joining us today on Up for Grabs, and we will see you next time.